Well, we were supposed to be on time. Try to be on time. Think about living out in the country. Sometimes your internet's up, and sometimes, like, it went down, like, the minute. Zach, you can back me up on this one. Like, literally, 1 minute before we hit the air, all of a sudden, bam, zap, connection issue.
Yeah.
Jeff
says, Zach, you're frozen. I said, Jeff, you're gone.
Jeff, you're gone. I'm like, oh, Zach's got a goofy face here. Maybe I'll do a screen cap here and really embarrass him. And then I realized, oh no, the problem is me. Once again, as always, the problem is me. We have a lot to get to, and we're starting late. So I want to fire through a couple of things here really quickly and get to our guest, and that is Pierre McGuire. We got a lot to get to with Pierre, whether it's Game 5, speculate on Game 6, discussions of free agent signings and trades, and the draft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll kick it off with what's going on in the program today. And remind you, as always, that Daily Outline is powered by FanDuel. Make every moment more with North America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. And coming up on the program today, Cats in Control. Kind of sounds like an updated version of a Harry Chapin song. Cats in Control. We'll talk about Brad Marchand now and Brad Marchand come July 1st. Speaking of which, we'll talk about free agency. We'll talk about Malkin playing one more year as a Pittsburgh Penguin. And if we have time, we'll get into a conversation about the upcoming NHL draft. In the meantime, let's get right to our first guest of the program here. Start of today's show. This segment, by the way, is a presentation of Budweiser. Budweiser is encouraging buds to make time for playoffs, not excuses. Every goal, every check, every win is better enjoyed with your buds. Phone a bud, text a bud, ping a bud, and call out their excuses for bailing on the playoffs. After all, the playoffs are the most wonderful time of the year. Make them count. When it's springtime, it's go time. And we're starting off the show by going to our friend, the great Pierre McGuire, who joins me now, albeit a little bit late. And Pierre, that one is on me. No. I am diving on the grenade. I am falling on the knife on this one. It's all because of me.
I just want you to know what a professional Zach is. Zach
yes, that's true.
Called me right away, and he said, "Hey, Pierre, we might not be able to do the show today, and here's why." Yeah. And I said, "Jeff is not bailing on the show." And Zach said, "No,
wasn't up to me.
So it's the internet connection. It's okay. Look, we're ready to rock. Let's go." But
we're
Zach's
good.
A pro. Zach is a pro.
Zach's a pro. My connection is not. But I'll tell you what. And listen, this conversation, like the initial one we'll have here, will kind of take us into a lot of different areas. When I say the name Brad Marchand, what comes to your mind right away?
Competitor.
The other part of that is 2 goals in Game 5. And we're all wondering about, excuse me for one second, we're wondering about Conn Smythe, and we're wondering about free agency, to which you say what?
Win the cup first. I think Brad's all about winning the cup. He's not worried about the Conn Smythe, and I don't think he's worried about his contract right now, Jeff. You look at the way he's played. I said this earlier today on another show in the United States. Here's what I've seen. I've been watching Brad play since he was a kid playing for the Moncton Wildcats.
Yep.
And the biggest thing to me about Brad Marchand, he's always had hockey sense. He was mentored by unbelievable people. Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, and Mark Recchi. Those are his 3 go-to mentors in pro hockey. I remember him playing in the Super Series where he missed 2 games because Brent Sutter said, "You know what? I don't like the way you're playing." He took it personally. He goes to the World Junior that year over in Pardubice in the Czech Republic. He rips up the World Junior, plays great. Brad has always been a guy that's a competitor. He's first about winning, and the other stuff comes later. So I'm going to say he's not worried about free agency, and I don't think he's really worried about Conn Smythe right now. I think he's worried about getting his name on the Stanley Cup again. And, Jeff, think about it for 1 second.
Yep.
He's on from 11. He misses in 13, and he misses in 19. And the miss in 19, a big reason why Jordan Binnington, the first 10 minutes of the St. Louis-Boston Game 7. But the other part, in the last little while of the first period, he let a back check go on Alex Pietrangelo that ended up in the back of the Bruins net, and that Game 7 was over. He remembers that. Don't kid yourself. He remembers that.
So one of the things that I keep coming back to with Brad Marchand, and right now, like, look, it's easy to look at the Boston Bruins and say, how could you not see this coming? Look at Brad Marchand. He might win the Conn Smythe Trophy and Stanley Cup, etc. He wouldn't be in this situation right now if he were playing with the Boston Bruins. I mean, this is comparing chalk and cheese. I get it. But I look at Brad Marchand and I say to myself, yes, intense competitor. And two, I've talked a lot about this phenomenon of the 1 minute penalty. Not quite a penalty, but probably could be something, but it's not going to be something in the playoffs. Even that goal off the draw where he gets the jump on Vasily Podkolzin, which is a great, like, technically you might be able to blow that one dead. Does he jump a little bit early? Yeah, maybe. But to your point about being a competitor, like, I don't know, and there's a handful of guys that rise to this level too. But as far as being able to play on the line consistently, he does it. And he couldn't do that early in his career. Like, it took Brad Marchand a long time to find where the line was. Was there a moment for you where you said, now he's got it? Or did this just sort of evolve over the last however many years?
I think his got it moment was when he embarrassed himself with Ryan Callahan. And, he did the licking thing in Boston. I think that one scared him straight. I haven't seen a lot of shenanigans from him ever since that moment. So I think that's the one that got him straightened up. I also know in the 2011 Stanley Cup Final, he was talking a lot of garbage. I was down there doing the game, and I remember there was one instance in Game 3, I believe, in Vancouver, where Mark Recchi basically grabbed him during a TV timeout and straightened him up pretty quick on the bench. That's why I speak about the mentorship with this player. Think about it. Recchi's already in the Hall of Fame. You got to think at some point, and I'm on the committee, so I can't say too much.
Yep.
But you got to think at some point, Bergeron and Chara both are going to get some acknowledgement there. So those are his three mentors in pro hockey. That's pretty darn good. Also, let's look at the coaches he's had over time. He's had amazing coaches, whether it be in Boston or now in Florida with Paul Maurice. And the role that's been created for him in Florida, I think you would agree, Jeff, is probably as good or better a role for him than he's ever had presented to him before.
Well, the one interesting thing about this too, this is great about having you on, because we can get some decent context here. So one of the things I've been thinking about with Brad Marchand is that line with Luosterainen and Lundell, and I think about, and this is just in the salary cap era of the NHL, 2007, Sammy Paulson, Travis Moen, Rob Niedermayer. Outstanding. Like, I would have given Sammy Paulson Conn Smythe Trophy consideration. That's how good I thought he was. I look at the HBK line with the Pittsburgh Penguins, that third line, incredible. You look at Gord and Coleman and Gaudreau with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and now this Florida third line with Brad Marchand enters the mix. I don't know how to rank them. I don't know how to slot them. I've always said that Anaheim line was the best third line that I ever saw, and then another one rolls along here in the playoffs. Do you have context for these four outstanding third lines in the playoffs?
I don't think Tampa would have won the Stanley Cup if they didn't have Coleman, if they didn't have Gaudreau, and if they didn't have Gord playing the way they were in that Stanley Cup or those Stanley Cup final. I mean, I was there working them, and I can tell you they were great. The Paulson line with Travis Moen and Niedermayer in Anaheim in 2007 was phenomenal. Did all those games. I was actually working from the Anaheim bench, if you remember, when the games were in Anaheim, because they didn't have it between the bench position in Anaheim back then. So actually doing the games from inside the glass, but actually on the Anaheim bench. And our good friend Brian Burke's the one that went to Randy Carlyle and said, don't worry, he's not going to bug you, but he's going to call the game from the end of the bench. And you could tell just how great Paulson was, that entire Stanley Cup run, how great Niedermayer was, and Travis Moen was outstanding. And, Jeff, you know what it comes down to? And I'm so glad you brought up all those great lines. It comes down to players being presented roles and them choosing to accept the roles. And that's what's going on in Florida right now with Luosterainen, Lundell, and Marchand. They've all accepted this role that's been created for them, and man, oh man, are they thriving in it.
What was the story for you for Game 5? Was it the getting the jump? Was it smothering Edmonton? Was it Bobrovsky? Like, what was it for you and the Florida Panthers in Game 5?
Attention to little details. If you look at, so you talked about the two Marchand goals. I'll give you an example. The first thing he does, if you really watch the tape like a coach would watch it, watch what Marchand does when he recognizes Corey Perry's on the ice against him for the end zone faceoff in the in the Florida defensive zone and the Edmonton offensive zone. He recognizes he can beat Corey Perry in a straight line race, so he beats him. And then eventually the puck comes to him in the neutral zone, and he sees it's Jake Wallman on the ice against him, so he goes outside in and roasts him. But then you talked about the way he beat Podkolzin to the jump. Oh. The thing that I saw him do, he identified the Matthias Ekholm, a left shot, was playing on the right side. Ekholm, 99.9% of the time, plays on the left side. This time he was playing on the right side. Marchand saw that. He saw it right away, and he went and attacked him. And again, he went outside, inside, and he embarrassed Matthias Ekholm. And you know what? Yeah. You know better than anybody. That guy's a heck of a player.
You know what? He is.
It's a detail.
He is, like, I love, like, he's just like shots, like, at his best, pucks don't go to the net in his zone. He is like a pure, and he's a workhorse, but he's struggling right now. You can see that he is not 100%. His head is saying, I want to do this, and his body's saying, yeah, we're not there. We're not there right now. You can really tell it with Ekholm.
No, and I agree. But here's the one thing about Marchand, because we're talking about Brad too. I don't know if you agree, but this is the most mature I've ever seen him play. Like, he's just so much more mature in this series. He's not taking silly penalties. He knows there's a microscope on him. He's really smart in terms of what his decision-making is like on the power play. Tremendous attention to detail off the rush. His own in-zone coverage has been outstanding. I mean, this is the most mature I've ever seen him play.
Get raises in the NHL, but here's Brad Marchand, and we're saying, is Florida going to pony up? You know, the Dallas Stars tried to get him at deadline. He wasn't going to go to Dallas. He made his mind up about Florida, but you could see Jim Nill going back there. You wonder about Utah, like Toronto, maybe. Like, at the end of it, I know Brad Marchand may not be focused on it, but it is a conversation. Where and how much is the raise going to be?
I think that's a very fair question from you. And here's the one thing I would think about. How comfortable is he in Florida? Is he prepared to give him a little bit of a haircut? How much does a no state income tax affect his decision in terms of the bottom line and the ability to, buy real estate? There's a lot of different things that go into this. I'll never forget the year Steven Stamkos had a chance at the first unrestricted free agency in his career. In November of that season, I was in Tampa doing a game, and Steven grabbed me, and I said, hey, what's your deal? Are you going to stay or are you going to leave? And he looked at me and he said, why would I leave? We got a great owner, got an unbelievable coaching staff, surrounded by unbelievable players. Yes. We have all these great things coming through the organization. Why would I want to leave? I'm the captain. We're probably going to win the Stanley Cup. And they did. And he stayed. And I said, can I use that? He says, yeah, of course you can. So I just kept saying it in all the broadcasts. I said, why would he leave? There's no reason for him to leave. And he stayed. I think Brad Marchand could be in the very same position going forward.
I understand that Florida would love to keep all of them. Would love to keep Ekblad, although I think you look at Seth Jones and say, okay, that's Ekblad insurance. That's Ekblad insurance, much like Justin Falk was Alex Pietrangelo insurance in St. Louis. Love to keep Sam Bennett. Love to keep Brad Marchand. But everybody has the same salary cap. I know state tax is an issue, but everybody has the same salary cap. And there are some guys that look at, by the time you hit this stage in your career and you've won a couple of Stanley Cups, go set your family and your family's family up for the rest of their lives. You've earned that one. So I think that's what we really wonder too is, and let's not forget too, the Florida Panthers do have an ability to identify where players are undervalued elsewhere. And Gustav Forsling is probably the best example. It's a waiver claim. And Florida said, no, there's something there with this guy. So I don't necessarily know that if one escape or if two escape, that this whole thing is going to collapse at all, because this is an organization that identifies and attacks and signs and brings in and makes part of the mix and goes back to the Stanley Cup Final.
I think the Forsling one, though, there was some insider information. There was a guy named Joel Quenneville that was coaching there then, and I think they had some pretty good inside intel on what Forsling was like because Joel had had him in Chicago. That's just something I've always thought about. But no, you're right. They do such a good job, whether it's Rick Dudley, whether it's Paul Fenton, any of their pro scouts, they do such a good job at the professional level identifying what you just said. And that is finding players that fit where they have needs in Florida. And they do it so well. Marchand goes from being a first-line player in Boston to a third-line player in Florida. And look at how he's thriving. It's unbelievable.
Goes from first line to third line. He goes from 6 and change to a major raise here coming up. And let's not forget here, he's 37 years old. And Pierre, he's had double hip surgery. Was it 22 or 23? He had double hip surgery. in your 30s. Like, I know that's always been the Swedes. Nobody heals quicker than Swedes. You know, Alfredsson, they'd say, oh, he's gone 6 to 8, and he's back in 4. Like, the Swedish hockey players heal up quicker than any other. Like, I swear, like, part of Brad Marchand must be Swedish. To come off of double hip surgery like this and to thrive is nothing short of remarkable.
No, it's an amazing thing, really. But also, because I know how much you pay attention to it, Brad Marchand's work habits are unimpeachable. His work habits are excessive in a good way, in an unbelievably positive way. So I look at it and I just say, here's a guy that cares so much about being a great player. I was asked about this earlier today. How important do you think legacy is for a player? And I think when you're a player like Marchand, who's been around greatness, legacy matters a lot.
Yeah.
And he's on his way to cementing his legacy as being one of the game's most clutch players over time. It's unbelievable.
Okay, speaking of legacy, Grant Fuhr, 1988. And the reason I bring Grant Fuhr, 1988, up is that is the last time a team won the Stanley Cup and the goaltender had a sub-900 save percentage in net. You win the Stanley Cup generally, well, always, going back to Grant, your goalie is a 900 save percentage goaltender. Neither of the Oilers goaltenders right now are on the positive side of 900.
Right.
Chris Knobloch refused to name a starter for tomorrow. No surprise. He'll wait till the last possible moment. How are you feeling and where are you at right now? Whether you want to factor that Grant Fuhr 88 stat in or not, how do you feel about the Oilers and their goaltending and how that affects any idea or thought they have about winning the Stanley Cup?
Oh, I think the goaltending is a huge issue in Edmonton. I've felt that way for a long time. I do think Stuart Skinner will get the net in Game 6. For whatever reason, I just think that they trust him. The star players in the team feel comfortable with him. He's a homegrown product, and I think he wants to prove a lot of people wrong going into Game 6. Doesn't mean he's going to be able to do it. But I'd be shocked if Stuart Skinner weren't the goaltender. But again, I'm not in their room, and I haven't talked to Chris Knobloch or Paul Coffey or Mark Stewart or Glenn Gultz, and I haven't talked to any of those guys. But I would just tell you that based on what I'm seeing and what I'm reading through the lines, I would say I'd be surprised if Skinner weren't the starter.
I don't believe, and I don't think many of us do believe in, momentum between games in a series, and this series has proven that. Listen, I still think that the Oilers can come back and have like 2 outstanding performances, and we have a parade in Edmonton after Game 7. Having said that, you look for things that the Oilers can carry over from 5 to 6, and I'll just be blunt. Connor McDavid finally scored a goal.
Yeah,
goals go right to your legs. And he's already the fastest player in the NHL, in the world. Thoughts on Connor McDavid finally scoring and what that means for the Oilers?
Well, it means a lot for the Oilers. It means a lot for him. My concern is, and I felt this way going into Games 3 and 4, Maurice is a really good coach. He gets last change. They clearly have a plan. Ekblad's a big part of that plan. Barkov's a big part of that plan. Forsling's a big part of that plan. Whenever McDavid's on the ice, I thought the way they handled it in Game 4, when they come from behind win, they broke up Draisaitl and McDavid. Knobloch did on the Edmonton bench. I think to look for more of that in Game 6 if they're going to win that game. Matchups are going to matter a ton in this Game 6, probably as much or more than they did earlier in the series because fatigue's starting to set in, especially for the more impactful players. What people forget about Game 4, and I talked about it before Game 5, McDavid played 30-plus minutes in that game. He was the only forward for either team that played over 30 minutes. Maybe he is starting to get into rhythm, but that was a quick turnaround, and the whole Oiler team didn't have as much as what Florida did, who played all 4 lines. So I think fatigue sets in, but the last change is going to matter a lot. Connor's going to have to play the best game he's played if Edmonton's going to have a Game 6.
Okay, I'm going to go
7. Game 7, sorry.
I'm going to go on a little bit of a fishing trip here with you. And see where we get. So a former colleague of yours, James Duthie from TSN, put up this tweet a couple of moments ago talking about the nastiness between these two sides and what's onside and what's offside. And it's a really interesting question because you've been there in between the benches Okay, like you've lived this. Let me grab this. I'm gonna try to get Zach to get this thing up here. Duthie says multiple people who are involved or close enough to hear it all say this is the nastiest trash-talking Stanley Cup final they've ever seen. Usually some subjects are off limits. Not here. Everything is on the table. Pure verbal hate. Now, let me bias you by saying what I've always been told is the worst trash-talking final was 2010, Chicago and Philadelphia. When you talk about everything is on the table, I was told that was it. From your experience, which one was the nastiest you've ever covered?
From '06 to 2022, I believe I was involved with every Stanley Cup final in those years. I think the worst one was the beginning of the Vancouver-Boston series in 2011. That was really bad. Marchand was a part of it. Maxime Lapierre for Vancouver was a part of it. Remember the Nathan Horton hit. There were a lot of guys. Aaron Rome was involved in. There were a lot of guys involved in that. That was a nasty one verbally. That was a nasty one physically. So I'd say that one is up there. 2010 for sure. Philly, Chicago, everything was in play. 100% everything was in play. But I'd say 2011 was pretty nasty. I'll tell you that, pretty nasty.
Yeah, both inside.
We had a lot of stuff. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I'll say this. There was a lot of different discussions about biology, different people performing biological things. It was very interesting. I learned a lot.
I'm glad I went on this fishing trip with you. We were learning about biology and how players are very curious about the biology of the players on the other team. So that's very interesting. What do you think tomorrow looks like? I'm going to drill down a little bit tomorrow, but as we are 24 hours away here, like what does it look? What does it feel like to you? I mean, you've been part of game days where they could be, the cup could be handed out, the white gloves coming out in the big silver mug. Walk us through like the whole day here.
Well, when we won in 91 and 92, we were much better prepared to win in 92 than we were in 91. The 92 team won 11 straight games to win the Stanley Cup. That was never done before, and it hasn't been done since. So there was a level of preparation. I'll never forget it. We had a pregame meal, actually a breakfast meal meeting at the Drake Hotel. Everybody was unbelievably professional. The focus was there. You could tell right away. And so all the games I've done after that as a broadcaster, usually the team that has a chance to close it down and win the cup, they're usually pretty good about the professionalism part. The other guys know that they probably don't have an insurance policy past that game. They're a little bit nervous, a little squeamish. But I would say Florida tomorrow, they didn't go all the way out to Edmonton and win a Game 5 to come back and lay an egg in Game 6 at home. I don't believe they will play a bad game. I think they'll play an unbelievable game tomorrow. Probably the best game they'll have played this playoff season.
You mentioned the Pittsburgh Penguins. Your Pittsburgh Penguins that won the Stanley Cup. The big story, if we can transition away from the Stanley Cup final here, the big story coming out, Josh Yohe and the Athletics saying this will be Malkin's, maybe not his last season in the NHL, but his last season as a Pittsburgh Penguin. He will not be extended. First of all, do you think he plays past this season? It's not as if he's washed. I mean, he can still play, not at the level where he was winning, Hart trophies, but I mean, this is still a significant player in the NHL. Do you think he still plays? And do you have a general wide brush thought on what we've seen from Evgeni Malkin?
I just feel bad. Father Time is kicking in. All these guys, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, they've put in so much into that amazing hockey city that is Pittsburgh. Gino's not nearly the same player. You know it. I know it. Mike Sullivan knew it before he went to New York. And I think even Evgeni knows it. The truth is that everybody's got an expiry date when it comes to careers. And I would say he's closer to probably not playing after this year. I hope he gets to play as long as he wants. He deserves that. But he's experienced so much greatness over the course of his career. I just don't know if he'd want to play in a diminished role. And you know what it takes me to, Jeff? And I'll leave you with this one on this question. I'll never forget talking to the great Joe Sakic before the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. And we were at a training, I forget where Team Canada's training camp was, but we were all there, and I was talking to Joe, and he says,
Calgary.
It was in Calgary, and
Yeah.
I just remember Joe telling me, you know what, if I don't feel I can play at the level I'm supposed to play at, I'm not going. And you know what? He didn't go. He didn't go.
Yeah.
So I think those great players, I think when they get to a certain point and they realize I'm not the
It's not
same
them.
guy, I think I'm done. And I saw Joe do that, and I think, I'm not going to say other guys' names because I'm not comfortable doing it, but I've known a lot of players that have felt kind of the same way.
I remember talking to Barry Trotz when he coached Washington once, and they were playing against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this was on the radio, and I said, like, who scares you more, Crosby or Malkin? Sophie's choice, right? And he said, listen, the thing about Crosby is he's consistent, and sometimes you know what he's going to do, but he's just too good, and he's just going to beat you. You know that. And he said, but Malkin frightens me. Malkin is terrifying because midway through the game he can just take off, and he's Superman, and he's something that's so different. Crosby is consistent. He will outwork you to get his result. But something special happens with Malkin. Like, do you kind of see that distinction that Trotz was trying to raise with me so many years ago?
Oh, I think you're spot on. Here's the other thing. Crosby and Ovechkin, everybody focused on those guys having a little animus towards one another on the ice. That really wasn't the case. It happened once on a Sunday afternoon game where they were yelling at each other right in front of me. And I was kind of laughing because I don't think they were comfortable yelling at each other, if you want to know the truth. But I would say this. You can go watch all the tapes when those two teams played, Pittsburgh and Washington. Watch how many times Ovechkin went after Malkin to kind of say, you know what, pal, you're a good player, but I'm better. We're both Russian guys, but I'm the best Russian. And they would go after one another big time.
So that's interesting you bring that up because you're right. Like, we always thought, okay, is there something between Crosby and Malkin? But the real animosity was Malkin and Ovechkin. I never got the full story, what it was about, but I believe it was it the Montreal All-Star game where Ilya Kovalchuk kind of brokered a peace between the two of them? Like, hey, we all have to play internationally here. And it was a sort of the end of that weird Malkin Ovechkin anger that they had towards one another. Here comes Ilya Kovalchuk saying, I know we want to compete against each other, but guys, we got to play together internationally as well. You remember that animosity between those two?
I remember the story. Yeah, 100%. I remember the story. I don't know exactly what led to the, anger between both of them, but here's what I'd like to think is that as they've gotten older, they've had a lot of time to look back at their respective careers, and both of them have just been amazing, amazing players in their respective cities. It's unbelievable to think about. Can you believe they both played on the 05 World Junior team for the Russians, and they got absolutely pummeled by Canada? Yeah. They didn't just get beat; they got pummeled.
Although I do remember the Halifax tournament the year before, and Ovechkin just going at everybody on route.
Yeah, he was 16 years old in 03. Malkin wasn't on that team, but Ovechkin is a 16-year-old, Jeff.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy good. The next year in Helsinki, those two guys were together. They were good. 05 was amazing. And Canada probably wouldn't have had their way with Russia in that World Junior had there not been the nuclear winter and no hockey in the 100%. NHL. Because all those great Canadians were playing because there was no NHL to play in.
Absolutely true. All right. To the NHL barking chain. You got a couple of moments left with you here. The barking chain that is our sort of hockey rumors and hockey speculation. Foregone conclusion now that Mitch Marner is testing free agency. Not exactly a surprise. Darren Ferris of Quartex likes to walk his guys there, and Marner's going to test. We wonder about all the usual suspects. And I think one of them that we should really include here are the Anaheim Ducks. But the one thing that I wonder about, and Pat Verbeek is, I don't think like some of the shine has gone off the new general manager 3.5 years in, but I think it's Anaheim feels that this is their time. They're trying to address their power play situation. Last in the NHL, they bring in Chris Kreider. I think they'll take a swing at Marner. I also think they'll take a swing at John Tavares. And there are people there in that organization that really like John Tavares. Would it surprise you if both ended up in Anaheim? It wouldn't surprise me, but then again, I don't know if Marner wants to be closer to winning a cup or getting to the playoffs, because right now Anaheim's next step is getting to the playoffs.
Agreed. So here's a couple things. I love the fact that you brought up Anaheim. with Joel Quenneville there, that makes it easier to recruit star players because the word on the street is from all the star players that played for him, especially in Chicago, how well he treats star players. There are not a lot of guys available that have won 3 Stanley Cups as head coaches and one as an assistant coach, which he did in Colorado when he was an assistant to Mark Crawford. So, I mean, 4 cups is a pretty substantial amount of legacy for a head coach. That's number one. Number two, I know this for a fact. Chris Kreider did not have Anaheim on one of the teams on his list, one of the teams he would go to. And his agent, Matt Cater, is very professional. He represents Leo Carlson. He also represents Alex Killorn and Ian Moore, who's a young defenseman out of Harvard coming up through their organization. So I know this for sure. Kreider's not ending up in Anaheim unless they have Joel Quenneville there. Yeah. So that says a lot about where Joel is, and I think a lot of veteran players around the league, if they had the opportunity to go somewhere and it's down to Joel versus another coach, I think most guys are going to play for Joel. And one other thing on Anaheim, Dr. Samueli and his ownership group are phenomenal people. They care so much about hockey, especially hockey in Southern California. And he basically said, hey, we're opening up the pocketbooks. We want to win. We want to win. And so they're not going to stop. They're going to go all in on whatever they can do. I'm not surprised you're saying Mitchell's name, and I'm not surprised you're saying John's name. I'm not surprised.
Let's close on this one. Just talking about Chris Kreider a second ago, I think a lot of us are wondering, new coaching staff, here's a big trade. The Rangers are always fascinating to watch. It's New York. I don't think for 1 second anyone thinks that the manager is done here. What are you curious about with the New York Rangers? We'll end on that.
I'm really curious about how many more leaks they're going to have out of their organization. Are they going to poison their dressing room in the summer like they did last summer when they started leaking guys' names out? I was stupefied when they did that. I couldn't believe that. Somebody internally did it because the writers weren't making stuff up. That was happening, whether it was Barclay Goodrow, whether it was putting out Zibanejad's name, whether it was putting out Kreider's name. I mean, they putting out Trouba's name. They destroyed the infrastructure of their organization by doing that. I don't know how they're going to do it this year, but Zibanejad's name's already out there. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but I would say this. There's some really good young players there. There's some guys that are really overrated there too. And so they're going to have to figure out who the real good young ones are and who the overrated young ones are.
Curious, never a dull moment in the Big Apple. Pierre, you're the best. Thanks as always. First of all, thanks for putting up with our technological breakdown, and by that I mean my internet here. And you're the best. Always appreciate the feedback. Always appreciate the comments and the candidness on the sourest series between two teams and the anatomy lesson.
Yeah.
Dr. McGuire presiding.
I hear we're doing a little draft work. I can't wait to do that with you. I'm so excited about that. I cannot wait for that. And, this one, listen, I know that normally there's a lot of rumors and speculation going in, and then everyone just gets up there and makes their pick. The team that I'm most interested in curious if you have a different one, is Utah at 4. Because this is found money. They won, right? They bounced up to number 4. Do they keep the pick? If so, they're going to get a good one. Or do they try to trade down? Do they trade the pick outright? We know they need goaltending help. We know that they're looking for another defenseman, probably another wing. Like there's maybe a center. Like Utah's got a laundry list here, and all of a sudden they found themselves with the number 4 overall pick as well. Who are you most curious about? I love the Utah one. That's one that I would really look at, and the other one is Chicago. I'm dying to see what the Chicago Blackhawks decide to do with their pick.
Anton Frondell.
Good.
If they keep it, I really wonder about Anton Frondell, but we shall see where they go.
We shall see.
We shall. Thanks, pal. We'll talk soon.
I can't wait. See you later. Bye, Jeff.
There he is, the great Pierre McGuire, being very generous with his time and a very challenging day here around the broadcast center. Zach Aru, Pierre just mentioned a couple of seconds ago Mika Zibanejad, and already, now that the name is out there, and the minute you whisper Toronto, and James Myrtle was writing about this, all of a sudden you start to say, could a Zibanejad for Morgan Riley deal work for everybody here?
Yeah, and new change of scenery, I think. Like we talked to Pagnotta this morning on Leafs Morning Take. I stepped in and co-hosted there, and he was kind of talking about how the general consensus that you're getting with some of these guys around the Rangers is that if he goes somewhere else, or some of these agents elsewhere, is that if he goes somewhere else, it could just be that thing that kind of kickstarts him again, where he's just not happy right now and happy with his name and happy with his friends being traded. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily the piece I think that I would be looking for personally, because I think you're trying to change the overall construct of the Leafs. But yeah, I get what you're floating. I see what you're saying there with that one.
Putting it out there, just saying it's part of the conversation. It's now become part of this conversation. I'm curious about this as we look to wrap up an albeit brief show here to kick off the week. Greg Wyshynski returns tomorrow, by the way. I wonder if you have cooked up here. The sheet is powered by FanDuel. We don't have a game tonight. Home of the same game parlay. Make every moment more on FanDuel. FanDuel, proud to connect fans to the major sports moments that matter to them. This one is yours. We have no game tonight. What do you think?
Okay. I've gone back here now to the cup handoff market, Marek. I showed this one to you before we started the season, or before we started the Stanley Cup Final. I was looking at what we had with the Panthers versus the Oilers guys who came up on each side, and we have a new list here now. So Nate Schmidt and Brad Marchand are tied for first at plus 190 of who would get the cup first for the Panthers if they won. Bob is now in third, and then Seth Jones and Aaron Ekblad. I get why Nate Schmidt's up there, Jeff, plus 190,
Veteran,
him and Marchand even.
Yep.
Veteran, hasn't won it before. I think that based on his play, this
Brad
is
Marchand?
Marchand's award. Yeah, if they win this, I think it's his.
I thought you were going to put up Conn Smythe odds. I really did. I'm like, okay, I wonder what Zach's got going here. And I wonder how much
It hasn't
on
changed
FanDuel
too much.
It hasn't, eh?
Mm-mm.
Not
Which
after
I guess
the
is
two
also an
goals?
interesting thing I should have probably brought up anyways. But no, he's still sitting around plus 500, and depending on where you're looking around, I think FanDuel last I saw was like 495, but it's still right now Bennett's. I think just because he's scoring as well. Like, he scored in the game on Saturday night. Like, it's not like he's falling off when Marchand puts up that performance, but I think he's just right there with them. To me today, it was the cup handoff that I was looking at where I was like, wow, Marshy is really jumped up there, because with the last time I showed you this list, he was, I think, fourth here among these guys. Seth Jones was ahead. Bobrovsky was just ahead of him there, so kind of sitting in the same spot, but he's now tied with Nate Schmidt at the top of the leaderboard.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I was voting right now for the Conn Smythe Trophy, I would probably have Sam. Again, we'll see what happens tomorrow and if there's a Game 7. But right now, to me, it's still Bennett's to lose for the Conn Smythe. We'll see about the handoff. I can understand Nate Schmidt. I can understand Brad Marchand. I can understand Seth Jones. But as far as playoff MVP Conn Smythe, I think for me it'd be Bennett, and it's just because of the goals.
Yeah.
It's the goals.
Yeah.
It's the goals. Any final thought on today's broadcast as we shuffle off the air here? Albeit brief one today, folks.
No, just appreciate Pierre for sticking with us there, figuring that one out. Appreciate everybody in the chat. So I want to make sure everybody drops your comments in the chat, and when we get off the air today, my ask of those of you in the chat or watching it back after, let us know in the chat who you would give the Conn Smythe to for either team. Because I want to know if people watching right now feel differently about some of this stuff.
Two things, Conn Smythe and who should get the cup first if Florida wins.
Yeah, sure.
We'll do both.
Perfect. Yeah, let us know.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for joining us today, whether you're watching on YouTube in the chat or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you to Pierre McGuire for hanging in today. I know it was a challenging one with the technology around these parts. Thanks for joining. We're back tomorrow, hopefully at 3 o'clock Eastern. There's always a chance. Morning Cup of Hockey.
That one had
at
nothing
9.
to do with us today. Nothing to do with us.
Well, it's my internet, dummy, so I guess technically it's me. DFO Live at noon, and then our act here at 3. Have a great night. Hockey returns tomorrow. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.